Hey, all you Ethic cuties and the 40% of you who have still not subscribed to the Ethicsverse, welcome to the coolest place to be every Tuesday at noon Eastern. I got a real treat for you today. We are talking with the one and only Reed Blackman. You know him, you love him. It's book launch day. His new book is coming out right now as we speak. The book is called The Ethical Nightmare Challenge. And so we have seen a lot of change in AI over the last couple of years. We saw the famous case of Air Canada, which, they got sued for. We saw the New York lawyer get debarred because he used so many cases in his submission that did not exist. He chat GPT'd those things. We saw Deloitte deliver multiple reports that did not have any backing, that were all AI generated. And so every ethics and compliance person that I talk to is thinking about AI risk. They're working hard to build these programs and to build their policies. And many times, the technology outpaces the policies before they're put into practice. So is the way that we're thinking about AI, is it the right way? Is it able to keep pace with the change that seems to be coming faster and faster? So our guest says no. He has this book, I just can't say enough good things about it. It's a phenomenal book. It's really fun. It's really funny. I'm not kidding. I finished it last night, prepping for today. And I loved, I love Reed's first book, Ethical Machines. This is like the black belt version of it. So he says no, and we're going to be diving in today with a bunch of frameworks so you can be a little bit smarter with this technology that we all know is changing our lives and changing our workplaces. But how do we really kind of wrap our arms around the risk? So because it's launch day, because we love Reed, he's such a great friend of the show, we're going to be giving away, you heard it, 20 copies of the Ethical Nightmare Challenge. So keep those comments coming in the chat. We'll try to get to those in real time. Share the frameworks that you're dealing with right now or the struggles that you're dealing with and win yourself a book. And if not, go on Amazon and go ahead and grab one. Of course, we have a bunch of credits to give out, whether it's with SHRM or the Compliance Certification Board or HRCI. This is the place to be twice a week. And wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the benchmark report that should be on your console. So if you have not downloaded that and laminated that and put it in the various rooms within your house, now's the time to do that. Our third-party risk management platform, we're getting a lot of great feedback on it. So please fill out this form if you're interested. We'll be reaching out to you in the next couple of days. We've had really a ton of meetings. So if we haven't reached out to you yet, be on the lookout for that. I want to also talk a little bit about our disclosure platform that is a great augment to your case management system. So if you can think about your hotline as one type of disclosure, and you can think about disclosures as a purpose-built solution that allows you to flexibly create new channels and new inroads for risk intelligence. Maybe it's AI risk, maybe it's slip and falls, maybe it's safety incidents in a manufacturing setting. And you can get all those into a central risk brain. You now can expand your view of the risk surface within your business and make better bets with your time. That's what so much of our jobs are coming down to right now. Also, round of applause for this one. You guys are going to absolutely love this. We have a brand new platform that's coming out. We're officially launching it on Sunday. I can't keep a secret, so I want to give you a little glimpse into Policy Plus.
Creating one compliance policy takes over 40 hours. Manual research, manual drafting, and manual formatting for every single policy. What if AI could do it in minutes? Introducing Policy Plus from Ethico. Watch what happens when a compliance officer types a single prompt. Generate a HIPAA-compliant patient data privacy policy for a 500-bed hospital system. One click and Policy Plus's AI goes to work. Section by section, the policy builds itself. HIPAA, high-tech, and state-specific requirements all mapped automatically. In under 60 seconds, a complete, structured, regulation-mapped policy is ready for review. Then, your compliance team refines it. Edit with AI suggestions, track every change with full attribution on every edit. With an 80% reduction in policy creation time, what used to take 40 hours now takes under 8. Regulation mapped from day one, this is what AI-native policy management looks like. See Policy Plus live. Book a demo at ethico.com/demo.
So how do you like that? Policy Plus, you guys are going to absolutely love it. A lot of those pain points in your current policy management system are out the window. No file checkout, real-time collaboration, real-time translation, real-time drafting, phenomenal analytics, all HRIS driven to take all these steps out of a really painful process. So if you're interested in checking that out, you should be. Hit us up on ethico.com or drop a 1 in the chat and we will have somebody reach out to you. All right, let's get a massive welcome to the one and only Reed Blackman. Reed, give us a little intro to your consulting firm, some of the impacts that you've had in organizations, and then I'll give everybody a little flash of this giveaway that we're giving. We're just giving away everything today. We're giving away a bunch of books. We got a field guide for you for all the Ethicsverse members. So over to you, Reed. Tell us a little bit about your firm.
Well, I mean, first, you realize you should have been a game show host, right? I mean, what are you doing?
I missed my
calling. You should be a
calling.
game show host. Yeah, you did. It's ridiculous. I mean, from compliance, when you should be a game show host, you should be on TV, wheeling and dealing. I think you also would have been particularly good at like the 70s, like 70s game show host, Hollywood couple, whatever it was called.
Yes, dude. Yeah, no whammies, all that.
Yeah,
Hollywood
you would have
Squares,
been great.
yes.
Hollywood Squares would have been great. Yeah. Okay, right. So about me. So for the past 8 or so years, I've been working with organizations large and small and some government agencies as well, mostly focused on avoiding what I would now call the ethical, reputational, legal nightmares of AI. So building responsible AI programs for Fortune 500 companies, or AI ethics programs, or digital ethics programs, or AI governance programs, or trustworthy AI programs, or whatever the heck people want to call it. So my team and I have been building that for the past 6 to 8 years or something like that. And what this book is about, of course, is that the things that we've been building, they just don't work anymore. They worked back in the day, and for various reasons that I'm sure we'll get into, I think that standard approach, what I call now the standard approach to avoiding the risks of AI is just broken, and we need a totally different solution.
So that was the impetus for... Yeah, no, that's a perfect overview. People love you on the show. If you don't follow him on Substack, I hate Substack. There's a ton of slop on there. Not read Substack. It's really great. In your podcast, I also steal a lot from. Okay, there's a lot of really great conversations on there that are really kind of at the cutting edge, and so always an interesting conversation on your podcast, Ethical Machines. So this new book is coming out. Let me give everybody a little flash here. We've put together a field guide. So this is a great takeaway that captures some of the biggest principles and the biggest frameworks from the book, which we're going to be diving into today. So if you're not an Ethicsverse member, if you're part of that 40%. Go sign up so that you can at least get this thing. Okay. So what I want to start with, Reed, is you start the book talking about this analogy of the cat and the tiger. So I think that's a good frame to kind of dive into this conversation.
Yeah. So pretty simple. I mean, suppose that I gave you a cat and you're like, that's great. How do I take care of this thing? And so I also give you, I give you a cat care guidebook and I say, here's how you take care of cats. You say, oh, that's great. That's awesome. And then you come back to me and you purchase a tiger and you say, hey, Reed, can you update your cat guidebook for this tiger? They're both feline, so it shouldn't be a problem. Obviously, I'm going to have to say to you, what are you out of your mind? No, of course not. I mean, I get that they're both felines. They're both members of the same, species, right?
Genus? I don't know.
I don't know either. Probably should look that up. But look, no, tigers are totally different beasts. You can't just update a cat guidebook for tigers. You just need a totally different thing. And that's where we are in the AI governance space. We built responsible AI or AI governance playbooks, programs, systems, et cetera, compliance programs. We built it for narrow or traditional machine learning, and it worked for that. It was good for that. And then we took that approach, then generative AI comes along and people say, hey, can you update the book for generative AI? And we kind of did that. We sort of said, okay, we'll make it fit. It wasn't a nice fit. It wasn't perfect. So that guidebook started to wobble. And now agentic AI is coming and multi-agentic AI. And the question is, hey, can you update the guidebook again? And what we have to say is, no, let me tell you about a cat and a tiger. Okay, this is not, I get that agentic AI and traditional machine learning are members of the same, again, species, I think, but they're just totally different beasts. And the same guidebook can't just be updated for one or the other. We need a fundamentally different approach.
So, you talk about all of these incidents that have occurred. We talked about, I mentioned a couple of them at the top of the show, the Deloitte thing, the Air Canada thing. Which of these incidents do you think would have been catchable by an existing compliance program? And like, what do you think those like missed patterns can kind of tell us? And how kind of the ethical nightmare challenge, which we'll get to here in a minute, kind of fills in some of those gaps.
Well, probably. So, okay, in both of those cases, in the Air Canada case, what happened is someone was talking to their customer chatbot, which I believe was LLM powered, and they asked about the bereavement fare policy. The chatbot said, "This is our bereavement fare policy." Blah 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 blah. The person went off, purchased their ticket, et cetera, et cetera. Then tried to get reimbursed or whatever the appropriate protocol was that the chatbot said, and Air Canada said, no, that's not our bereavement fare policy. We're not going to refund you. And there was a lawsuit. In the lawsuit, Canada Air, or is it Air Canada? I think it's Air Canada. I can never remember which way it goes.
Yeah,
anyway,
Air Canada.
They said, hey, look, that was our chatbot said it. We didn't say that. The LLM said that, which is preposterous. And they then subsequently lost the lawsuit. But what happened was essentially the AI made stuff up. It made up the bereavement fare policy. That's what's called an AI hallucination, where AIs create false outputs, and that happens a lot. So that was a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago. I don't remember exactly, but literally just a few months back in October, Deloitte was in the news for writing a research report for the Australian government. This was October of 25. It contained AI hallucinated information. Just 1 month later, a different member firm of Deloitte did the same thing for the Canadian government, gave in a research report containing AI hallucinated information. Now, do those organizations have a policy around this? Maybe. What might the policy say? It may say something like, make sure that you're responsible for AI outputs. But that doesn't really do anything. So either one, they don't have the appropriate policy, or two, they have the policy, but A, it wasn't implemented in the right way, and B, training wasn't provided in the right kind of way so that people actually vet the outputs of these things. So let me back up for a second, though. I generally think policy is not the way forward. The standard approach leads with policy. And I think that policy is good for some things. It's a good tool in many instances. In the world of agentic AI, it is neither the most efficient nor most effective tool.
Yeah, policy is like a fence or something. And what we're talking about in the ethical nightmare challenge is kind of like some jujitsu, right? That we can move in different situations and defend ourselves in like a more kind of dynamic way or something like that.
Yeah, there's lots of things to say. I mean, there's lots of problem with policy first approach. One problem is, yes, exactly the point you're talking about, which is that policies are good for banning things, requiring things. You must do this, you must not do that. But the issue here is that there's lots of gray area. There's lots of ways to use AI wisely or unwisely. And people need to be enabled, they need to be empowered to exercise their professional judgment to use it well, to use it wisely, but they're not. They're just not empowered that way. And a policy is not the kind of thing that does that empowering. So we need a certain kind of education and training for people, not just there's a policy. So especially because, last point, the policy is always going to be yes or no, and there's lots of gray area, and we need to enable people to tackle that gray area. The second thing to say about policy, or at least the second thing I'll say now, and then I'll stop talking, is it's always behind the times. It's always behind the AI times. We have lots of clients, Fortune 500 clients. We develop their policy. It takes forever to get this policy board approved. I mean, for a Fortune 500 company, you're looking for at least a year until you get that board approved policy. Drafting the policy, no big deal. Now you get the rest of the C-suite involved and the board. Lots of deliberations and tweaking the language. The lawyers get involved. So it's at least a year. You finally pass the thing. It's not implemented yet. It's just a policy. You got to get people to be aware of it, to comply with it. So you start implementing, and then generative AI comes out. This is what happened with lots of our clients. We did the policy for narrow AI, then ChatGPT comes out. Oh my God, we got to update the policy, get the cooks back in the kitchen. Meanwhile, they're trying to implement a now out-of-date policy. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, we're done. Great. Now we got the updated policy for generative AI. Oh, no, here's agentic AI. Oh my God. And so, it's just a mess. It's just a total mess. So the policy is always behind the times, and the pace at which technology is changing is only increasing. We see changes in AI technology literally every month. We haven't even seen yet the next kind of AI, whatever that is. We have not yet seen what happens when quantum computers come out. What happens when you have quantum computers integrated with AI systems? What about in financial services, blockchain technology integrated with AI? Do you have a new policy for that? So anyway, the policies are They can be good, but again, they're neither the most efficient nor most effective tool in this context.
You said this like 20 times in the book, and I loved it. I loved the repetition of it because I feel it like it kind of broke down, it kind of like filled in the moat around AI. There's a lot of technical jargon with it. There's a lot of like black boxedness where we're like, well, I'm not really sure how this machine works. Let's kind of start, we don't need to do kind of a whole sort of taxonomy of AI unless you think it makes sense. But like, why did you repeat that so much? And why is that so empowering to reframe what AI is in the context of this statement?
Yeah, so AI is software that learns by example. I say it more times than I can count in the book. And I want to say it so many times because I think most people are reasonably intimidated by AI. They don't know what the heck it is. You ask a data scientist what it is, and you're not a data scientist, chances are you're not going to have a clue what the hell they're saying. So I think most people in compliance don't really have a strong grip on what exactly AI is. And they need a simple way, not misleading, not wrong, not dumbed down, just a non-jargon way of understanding what the heck is this thing that we're dealing with here. And so I try to just keep heading the table. We're just talking about software that learns by example. You know what software is. You know what it is to learn by example. And so if you give your software lots of examples of what your dog looks like, it learns what your dog looks like in photos. If you give it lots of examples of what good job applications look like, all else equal, it learns what good job applications look like. If you give it lots of examples of words being strung together coherently, it'll be good at itself putting words together coherently, like in the case of large language models or chatbots that we use today. So that's it's an easy way for anyone to understand, and it's the kind of thing that allows those non-technologists, non-data scientists to talk about AI with data scientists in a way that is not intimidating and is comfortable.
You said something in the book that like kind of made me pause. You said something like, if you ask the LLM for its reasoning, that response is also a hallucination. So talk to us a little bit about that, because I think, I feel like I use AI a lot, and I never thought about the sort of the hallucination rate or the hallucination presence. So talk to us about that frame.
Yeah, I call that the deliberation problem. So first of all, AI software that learns by example. In the case of large language models, the examples it learns from is, of course, how words get strung together on the internet and all the books, fiction or nonfiction, in all the blogs and all the transcripts, et cetera, et cetera. So it learns how to put words together coherently. It doesn't necessarily learn how to put words together in a way that's coherent and true. And so it can just make things up. There's lots of coherent sentences that are false. The earth is flat is a coherent sentence. You understand what it means, and you also know that it's false. Paris is north of Minnesota, coherent, false. It's not like incoherent sentences like Nick Ball ate crab. Like what does that mean? I guess that could make sense if Ball is your last name, but it's not.
Yeah.
Okay. So AI can come up with false things that hallucinates. And suppose you say, hey, listen, I need some advice on marketing or on how to develop a product or an investment. And you say, hey, how should I invest my money here? How should I develop this product? Blah, 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 blah. Now, you think, you know what? I'm really smart, though. I know about AI. I know what makes stuff up. I'm going to ask the AI why it came up with that advice. Why did you give me that advice, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini? And then it says, oh, well, I gave you that advice because of blah, 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 whatever it is. Now, the thing is, AI is not an evidence weigher. It doesn't deliberate. It doesn't think about reasons and weigh some reasons against others. It's always predicting what words are coherent with the words that came before it.
Right.
So when it tells you, I recommended that because of X, Y, and Z, it's not the case that it actually gave you the recommendation on the basis of X, Y, and Z. It's just saying it did the X, Y, and Z stuff because it thinks it coheres with what came before. But it's not the case that it gave you the recommendation that it did on the basis of reasons X, Y, and Z, because it's not the kind of thing that's capable of reasoning, identifying reasons and weighing them against each other. And so then what happens is you get sucked into the hallucinations even further, because you thought you were being clever and smart by asking it to sort of verify why it gave the recommendation that it did. And then it just gives you a hallucinatory explanation back. And now you believe that. And so you've sunk even further into, your quagmire.
I read something on Twitter a couple weeks ago where there was a study. I forget who did it. I'll have to go back in my bookmarks, which is a black hole in itself, to find it. But they asked various different models for business strategies using a whole wide spectrum of different types of businesses. Did you see this? Of different markets, different types of companies, and different products and all this kind of stuff, like a wide array. And they all they would all give essentially the same answer. The same kind of strategy, the same kind of integration strategies and things like that. And then, to your point, the reasoning was really just, obviously the answers were coherent, but obviously the same business strategy doesn't apply to every single market. You know what I mean? I think that's a great proof of that.
Yeah.
And I think that leads to an increased risk of what kind of turns into the false safety blanket of like the human in the loop at times, if those folks who are the humans in the loop don't really know kind of what to look for. What do you think about that human in the loop linchpin, or that safety net that we think can sort of solve for these things?
Yeah. Okay. That's great. I really like that example. I'm gonna probably steal that example, because it's just a case of it just learned how to put words together coherently about marketing strategies, and so just it applied it willy-nilly. Exactly. It wasn't reasoning about each individual case, because it doesn't do that sort of thing. Okay. Human in the loop. It could be good. Sometimes it doesn't work a lot. So a human in the loop is good when you're dealing with a relatively simple AI system. Let's just say it's a large language model. We're not even talking about AI agents yet. Let's just talk about a large language model. You're talking to the AI chatbot. If you are in that context, if you're a marketing strategist, you're an expert, you're a good person to be in that loop, because you think, oh yeah, that's a good suggestion. That's not, you've got the expertise, the wherewithal to say, yeah, that's good, that's bad. If you're not a marketing strategist and you say, okay, I'm going to ask the AI, what should I do here? What's the appropriate marketing strategy? And it spits out this thing. You're not in a position to vet the output. It looks really good because LLMs are very good at sounding confident and authoritative and knowledgeable. But you are not a good human in that loop. You're not, because you're not the right expert to actually vet the output. Right. So that's one way in which having a human in the loop doesn't work. Another way is when it's outputting stuff that is sort of in your area of expertise, but not quite. So the example that I like of this, and this happened back when ChatGPT first came out, you ask it for a medical diagnosis, and it comes at you with all this information about, from an oncologist perspective, a pediatrician's perspective, a rheumatologist perspective. If you ask a single doctor to vet that output, to be the human in the loop, the doctors say, I don't know, my specialty is this. I'm a pediatrician. I'm not a geneticist, and I'm not qualified to verify the outputs of what it says about the genetics situation here. I'm not a rheumatologist, so I'm not qualified to. And so what happened when Microsoft Healthcare and Life Sciences was doing research they were doing research on ChatGPT 4 at the time to see how good is it at diagnosing patients. They had to keep bringing in more and more doctors to vet the outputs because they couldn't do it. So it couldn't just have been a human in the loop. It had to be a team of humans. I think there were up to a couple of dozen doctors trying to verify the outputs, because the outputs were based on the training that the LLM got from literally all the medical journals, all the medical books, drawn from the set of all medical knowledge. The third and last thing I'll say about human in the loop is that as these systems get more and more complicated, more specifically, as our chatbots reach out to more and more tools, it draws information from enterprise databases. It draws information from various kinds of enterprise software. It draws more and more information from the internet. It's like this mountain of data and processing that the AI is doing. And then it says to you, hey, Nick, can you verify the output? And it's sort of like, how? You just pulled in a bananas quantity of data from dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of sources. How am I supposed to verify this in real time? It's this output, this quote unquote decision, is just based on more data than I could possibly vet. And so a human in the loop under a mountain of data and processing is not going to do the trick. They're just not capable of doing it.
So that's like one of the 6 shifts that you talk about, these 6 shifts of going from narrow to agentic AI. So maybe before we actually talk about these, I just had a slide up. Let's just spend like a quick 2 minutes on the sort of multiplicative sort of impact, at least in like risk expansion, as we move from sort of narrow to agentic agents. My agent will call your agent. I think you said something like that in the book. like that is that's an exponential, increase in risk surface. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The risk landscape gets insane. At the end of the day, we're looking at what I call a risk clusterfuck. It's a technical term. And it's because there are so many points of failure. So let's just talk about generative AI that doesn't call on the internet, doesn't do searches. They all do now, but just pretend that they don't. First of all, you've got the creation of the large language models or of the generative AI. And there's, as I call it in the book, so many decisions that go into how that thing gets made. And all sorts of decisions within that sort of internal supply chain could lead to all sorts of risks. So you got lots of points of failure there. Then let's fast forward and let's simplify a bit. It gets into the hands of end users, let's say employees at the company. Well, how do you get the outputs of an AI? It's, zoomed out 30,000 feet, a function of how those people train the AI, and crucially, a function of how you prompt the AI. Different prompts lead, of course, to different outputs. And so how many points of failure do you have there? I don't know. How many employees do you have? How many times do they use it? How many different times do they query it? And how many different contexts for how many different purposes? I mean, talk about many possibilities for failure. Okay. Now we move to agentic AI. And again, agentic AI is something like you've got a large language model, you've got a chatbot AI, and it gets connected to various tools. So we're talking about the internet, enterprise databases, other AIs, other pieces of enterprise software, non-AI software. And when you ask it a question, it does a bunch of stuff. More specifically, to be an agent, not only is it connected to those tools, but also you give it some and how it uses those tools. So rather than you saying, hey, AI, I want you to go to database number 3 and run that data through AI number 5, and then I want you to do a search on the internet and instead of giving it all that steps, you just tell the AI, here's my goal, here's what I want to accomplish. And the AI, quote unquote, figures out, here are the tools I need to draw from in order to create the output that you want. And for all the tools it's connected to and all the decisions that were made in creating those tools and how all those things interact, all those nodes of interaction are all potential points of failure, which means they're sites of high risk. And something can go wrong in one place in those nodes, you can see it echo throughout the system, snowball effect, cascading failures, that sort of thing. And so when you think about the risk landscape, it explodes as AI gets connected to more and more things, and we start letting it do more and more things on its own.
So, this leads to kind of how you start to describe how the risk landscape has changed. And you talked about it across these 6 sort of areas, which you kind of touched on. Nice job sort of summarizing that. But then you make this point that you're saying, if we're thinking about AI agents as like personal assistants, that's like the wrong frame. Yeah. And I think this is one of the most powerful reframes because again, in the back half of this conversation, which we're getting to very quickly, we're going to be talking about how to start thinking about and implementing better guardrails or better, jujitsu or judo within your organization to manage these risks that, our old tools and our old frameworks are getting passed by. How do you like that? Okay. So talk to us about why they're not personal assistants, but they're really more like, complex engineering systems, and why that sort of 2-dimensional application of a mere policy can't sort of compensate for the risks that can bloom out of this new chapter,
Yeah. So I think that I do this myself, and I don't think it's wrong. I just think it is in some context misleading. AI agents are kind of like personal assistants. And the example that I like to give is a very simple one. You tell your AI agent, hey, I want to go to Vienna. Here are the dates that I want to travel. And I want to stay in a hotel that's 4 stars within a mile of the city center. And I want restaurant reservations, blah, 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 blah. And then your AI agent goes off and it does those things for you. Just like a human executive assistant would go off and do those things, your AI agent does those things. And I think that's a very helpful framing when you're just trying to get a very basic understanding of what the heck are we dealing with here and what are its capabilities, or what can its capabilities be. But when you're thinking about it from a risk perspective, I think it's a lot less helpful. And the reason is that look, Nick, if you were my executive assistant and you screwed something up, I'd say, look, Nick, you messed up. Here's the thing that you did wrong, blah, blah, blah. What I wouldn't do is I wouldn't talk.
You'd be that nice about it? I mean,
I'd be very aggressive. You piece of... What I wouldn't do is I wouldn't talk to your medulla oblongata and your prefrontal cortex and your visual cortex. I wouldn't talk to the parts of your brain separately, let alone I wouldn't talk to your neurons, right? That would be, I talk to Nick because Nick is a coherent, more or less coherent entity. So I talk to Nick. But AIs are not coherent entities, or AI agents are not coherent entities because it's the LLM, yes, but then it gets connected to all these different tools. And I can't just tell the LLM, hey, you screwed up, make sure not to do that again, because sometimes the error is not coming from the LLM that you're interacting with, the AI you're interacting with, it's coming from one of the tools that it's calling on. And so, and that AI might not be able to know that the error is coming from that tool. Even if it does know the error is coming from that tool, it might not be able to correct for it because it's not a magical box that can do all the things. And so what you need to do is you need to get into that tool or those set of tools with which it's interacting and say, oh, we got to fix this stuff. Or we have to fix the way that this AI is interacting. And so what these AI agents really are not discrete, coherent individuals like a person. They're these very complex engineered systems that are more analogous to commercial jets, fighter jets, submarines, nuclear facilities. And those things, those complex engineered systems, take teams and teams of experts to design, build, test, deploy, operate, monitor, maintain, retire, and so on. And that's the way that I think we should think about AI, especially when we're thinking about things from a risk perspective.
So I love that. I just love that analogy. It really does kind of expand and kind of reframe what it is we're talking about. And so to kind of summarize like why this standard approach is not working, you talk about there's a bottleneck at the top. It takes too long to get something actually not just approved, but actually implemented and trained and so forth. We're looking at things in sort of the wrong direction. We're measuring the wrong things and we're using some of the wrong language. What would you touch on in that before we kind of pivot into the actual ethical nightmare challenge and how this can give us a lot more sort of dynamism in managing these risks?
Yeah, well, I already talked about the policy first. The standard approach started with a policy and it's very slow. So I won't talk about that again. Yep. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the outcome stuff, looking in the wrong direction. The way that we've been doing this is we say, okay, we want responsible AI or trustworthy AI. We have to govern our AI. We want AI ethics, whatever. And we start with certain principles like fairness and safety and privacy, transparency, accountability. The list is fairly standardized to this point. Now, the thing is, people look at that list and they say, yeah, that's great. We want that we want those are the principles.
Who doesn't want that?
Values. Right. Who doesn't want that? And then you say, okay, well, how do we do that? What's fair AI? What's privacy, respecting AI? What's transparency? And no one knows exactly what that means. And so what happens, reasonably enough, and I've recommended this, I recommended this in my first book, is you translate those values into procedures. So it becomes things like, we will vet for bias at each stage of the AI lifecycle. That's what it is. That's part of what it is to be fair. We will tell people when they're interacting with an AI. That's part of our commitment to transparency. And so you get these procedures. Now, here's the thing. Number one, it's weird, given that really the goal of AI governance and responsible AI is to avoid risk, to start talking about the ideal, to start talking about justice and fairness and privacy respecting. If what we're trying to do here is avoid the risks, avoid the bad stuff, then we should just specify what the hell the bad stuff is, as opposed to shooting for the ideal. So why are we looking for the ideal when what we really want to do is avoid the bad stuff? The other problem here that's related is, since you've translated your principles into procedures, you don't know what success looks like outside of compliance with the procedures. So if you ask someone, hey, did we get the fair outcomes? They say, well, we did the things, we did the procedures. I know, but did you get the procedures? Did you get the outcome of fairness from engaging in those procedures? I don't know. You defined fairness. You told me that fairness just is doing these procedures. So I did the procedure. So I don't know. So you don't get an outcome-oriented approach, where success looks like something like achieving an outcome. You just get, we did the things. So that's bad by itself, because the reason we want procedures is because we want to secure certain outcomes. That's the point of engaging in procedures, to secure an outcome. And if we can't define the outcome independently of the procedures that we're requiring, we don't know how to assess whether we've got the right procedures or not. So that's a bizarre situation.
That might be the most important sentence in the whole presentation so far. We're focused so much on those inputs. We're just sort of hoping that the outcomes end up taking care of themselves, when all we really care about are those negative outcomes. So now let's talk about, the ENC, which we'll use. This is ENC for ENC. Okay. So the ethical nightmare challenge. Why does this work? what made you pick nightmares, and how can this be a better guiding principle than us kind of striving for ideals on sort of the front end, you know, the backward looking, so to speak, as opposed to really focusing on, you know, where the train can go off the tracks.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll say what the Ethical Nightmare Challenge is. It's a framework. Then I'll say a little bit about nightmares. So the Ethical Nightmare Challenge is, at the core of it, is 3 questions. What are the ethical nightmares that pertain to your organization as they relate to AI? What resources does your organization have to avoid those nightmares? And how will you train your people to use those resources effectively? That's the core of the Ethical Nightmare Challenge. What are the nightmares you got to avoid? What resources do you have for avoiding them? How will you train your people to avoid them? Okay, great. Why do I focus on nightmares? Well, there's a lot to say here. One is that nightmares are easy to understand. Everyone knows what a nightmare is. You know, in your role, for your role, for your department, for the projects that you engage in for your work, what would an ethical, reputational, or legal nightmare look like for you? You'd sort of know that. And incidentally, if you're a leader and your people have no idea what a nightmare situation looks like for them in their role, like, that's a very dangerous employee. So that's a huge red flag. AI them, Or at least replace with a person who has some common sense. So we all understand the language of nightmares. Nightmares are also, of course, specifications of really bad outcomes. Right? A nightmare is, the example that I gave in the book of a non-corporate version is, I'm driving in the car with my family. My wife is next to me. My kids are in the back seat. I'm driving fast. I think it's an Italian countryside road or something like that. It's really windy. And I'm having too much fun. I go way too fast, and I go flying off the cliff. And the dread that I've just killed my family just, weighs on me. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. That's a nightmare. And it's a specification of a bad outcome. It's also a specification of why the bad outcome came about. I was driving too damn fast on curvy roads on a mountainside. That was really stupid. And so what do I need to do to avoid that bad outcome? Not drive super fast on very curvy mountainous roads. So nightmares are, we know what they are. They're specification of bad outcomes. They include how you arrived at that bad outcome, so they're thereby instructive, and they're motivational. It's not like, people don't jump out of bed excited for fair AI, transparent AI, accountable AI, and they don't jump out of bed ready to, I can't wait to comply with those procedures. Nobody, literally nobody. I think even people in compliance are not excited to comply with procedures. It's just, you do it. It's important, but everyone takes many more people take nightmares seriously. Talking about nightmares is highly motivational. It places the right amount of motivational weight or importance on the subject matter. So if you can get people to say, hey, what are the ethical, reputational, or legal nightmares that we really need to think about here? Then that comes along with an explanation for why this is important. It comes along with motivation. It comes along with being action guiding, right? It doesn't just say, hey, go be fair. Make sure your AI is fair. It says, hey, what are the bad outcomes that could arise from your using AI? What would unfair outcomes really look like in this scenario? And now that you've specified that outcome, the bad thing, it's not about SOPs. It's about problem solving. How can we now think about what do we need to do in order to make sure that we avoid those really bad, really unfair outcomes? Right.
And that example you gave fits obviously perfectly in the framework. For some reason, this slide didn't upload right, so apologies for that. But you give kind of 5 criteria for what a good nightmare is. You say it's vivid, it's plausible, it's relevant to the organization, it's relatable, and causally clear. And I think you made the point also that, like, if any one of those pieces are missing, then it's not like a valid nightmare to work back from. Where do you think people end up kind of falling flat in the application of this, or which of those do you feel like is hardest, or, why'd you come up with those 5? I just want to kind of double click on the, that shape.
Yeah. So, I think that one thing that happens when people talk about AI and risk is that they get overwhelmed. Like, there's so many risks. There's so many ways things can go sideways, and there's deep fakes, and there's this, and the security breaches. And so that's why organizationally relevant is a really important one, because it's not about all the risks of AI. It's you in your role doing this thing, whether you're using AI in a research project like Deloitte did, or whether you're actually part of a team that's developing AI, you just need to specify the nightmares that are relevant to your project or your department or your organization. And so I think that getting people to focus on of the set of all nightmares relevant to AI, what are the ones that are relevant to this project or to, let's say, the marketing department, because we're in marketing, so on and so forth?
Well, and I think the smart thing about it is that it's almost taking like a risk-based approach. Like you can't boil the ocean. You can't imagine every single thing. And we also struggle with the fact that we don't know what the different use cases, like I don't even know in my company what all the different use cases are and like how people are utilizing it. And so I love that sort of localized sort of, I don't know, it's like a SWAT team or like a SEAL team. You know what I'm saying? It's like a localized sort of problem solving in the context of sort of a broader framework that's applicable, that if those principles can be adopted by the people on the front lines, they'll know what their sort of localized nightmares are. And I also love how it can scale up and down the organization. So it's not just sort of across different departments, it's also up and down the organization. And again, a nightmare for the board is very different than a nightmare for somebody on the marketing team or for a nightmare for somebody in the, dev department or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that I love about the Ethical Nightmare Challenge as a framework. And you also talked about teams, and I call them Ethical Nightmare Challenge or ENC teams. Those ENC teams ask those 3 questions. What are the nightmares? What resources? What training? And those 3 questions can be asked at any level of the organization or anywhere. So you can ask it at the enterprise, the board and C-suite level. What are the organization-wide nightmares? What resources do we need to avoid it? What training do our employees need? You can ask it, you can go a level down, and you can have ENC teams at the department or division level. So we're in marketing or we're in HR. What are the nightmares that are relevant to HR? What resources do HR personnel need in order to avoid those nightmares? What training do HR personnel need in order to use those resources effectively? So same 3 questions. Now go down another level to a project team who's actually developing AI solutions. What are the ethical nightmares that pertain to this particular AI solution? What resources do we need to avoid those nightmares? So on and so forth. So you can ask those 3 questions at any level of the organization. And this does a tremendous amount to foster communication and collaboration, because those ENC teams, their mission is to answer those 3 questions. There's also a 7-step method for answering. And, one of the things that I provide with clients now is base level training and the worksheets so that they can actually go through those 7 steps and those teams can answer those 3 questions together. And we absolutely need clear communication at this point. Everyone right now is talking a different language when it comes to AI. They're talking a different language when it comes to AI risk. The data scientist certainly doesn't know how to talk to the HR person or the marketing person about the nightmares that are relevant to their department or to their role. And so by giving everyone those same 3 questions, I don't care if you're in the board or the C-suite or you're, the head of a department or you're a project manager, if you're all asking those same 3 questions and answering them using the same 7-step method, that does a tremendous amount to increase communication and thereby collaboration.
Yeah, I just love how it's like infinitely scalable and infinitely applicable kind of throughout the organization. Yeah. So in our last kind of, what do we got here? Like 15 or so minutes. Let's kind of dive deep in like nightmares by role. So, you made the point that like C-suite nightmares or department head nightmares or, they're all different, right? But for like a compliance leader running, let's say, a nightmare identification session, how do you stop the session from turning into like everyone's just sort of generic, generic anxieties instead of like true kind of role specific actionable nightmares that some steps can be taken, some problem solving steps can be taken to mitigate? Yeah.
So one thing I want to stress is that we need cross-functional collaboration, cross-departmental collaboration. And because the data scientist is going to see problems and solutions that the marketing person or the HR person is not going to see, and vice versa. And so we need cross-functionality. We need cross-functional problem solving here. It's also because the solutions are often going to be cross-functional. So when it comes to, for instance, we talked about hallucinations a lot, you're going to need the data scientists to do their bit to reduce hallucinations, but they can't eliminate them. And they'll do their part, but the people in the marketing department or in HR or in product, they need to do their bit to reduce hallucinations in this particular context. So we need both of those people involved to reduce the likelihood of the nightmares happening. Okay, that's one thing to say. The second thing to say is, if you just get a bunch of cross-functional experts in a room and you say, hey, avoid the nightmares, you're going to get chaos, right? Because everyone's got their own particular thing.
It'll just boil down to something vague,
Yeah, it'll be too vague. So That's why I made the 7-step method. That's why there's the ENC 7-step method of create the team. There's a worksheet of I'm not going to rattle off all the steps, but the core of it is that if you throw a bunch of experts in the room and say solve the problem, that's really hard. If you throw a bunch of experts or relevant people in the room and say solve the problem using the 7-step method, and you're going to fill out this worksheet as you do that, that's structured deliberation. And if you can give them structured deliberation, structured problem solving, now they can work together in a fruitful way. One thing to note here is that there's a bunch of ethical nightmares that are extremely probable given AI. So we've talked about hallucinations and bias and privacy violations, talked a little bit about cascading failures in the case of agentic AI. We talked about the deliberation problem. Anytime you're using AI, whether you're developing AI or you're using AI, you should go through those like 7-ish issues, those 7 potential nightmares, because they're always going to show up in some form or other. And the worksheet that we give clients has a drop-down menu of, okay, let's think about nightmares as it pertains to hallucinations, now as it pertains to bias, now as it pertains to, and so we're going through those things. And then they're also asked to specify not just what the nightmare is, but what are the pathways to that nightmare. So there's path 1, there's path 2, there's path 3, because there's lots of ways to skin a cat. There's lots of ways for that nightmare to become a reality. And
or a tiger,
first, yeah, that's right. And so that's funny. So first they're just going to brainstorm together about what are the possible nightmares. We're not talking about likelihood yet. If you get people saying, maybe that could happen, but that's so unlikely, we don't have to worry about that. That's for later in the method. Earlier in the method is let's identify the nightmares. Let's explain how those could come to be. And then we can have a conversation about what's the likelihood of that nightmare or that pathway becoming a reality, that pathway leading to that nightmare. And you start scoring, the team scores, again, with a rubric that we give them. They start scoring the likelihood of those different nightmares. And now you can start doing some very basic risk prioritization. All right, well, that would be a severe impact. We've given it a high severity score. We've given it a very high probability score. So that's going to be, of course, high priority. This one is very severe if it were to happen, but the likelihood of that actually happening is very low. So that's going to be a lower priority, so on and so forth. So you're giving them a structured way to deliberate, to problem solve, to score things so that they can prioritize appropriately.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting that, you kind of reframe this thing as saying, instead of like sort of looking backwards, maybe this is the wrong way to kind of describe it, but instead of sort of looking in the wrong direction, when we, turn around and look in this other direction, start with the end in mind, the end that we want to avoid, and then apply a framework, we can really break down what those nightmares are on sort of a local and then ultimately up into sort of an aggregate level. Would this process be it's kind of like an algorithmic process? Like, does it just get kind of iterated across different functions and different like layers within the organization? Like, how does all that kind of nest together and fit together?
Yeah, okay. So there's a couple things to say. One is that the Ethical Nightmare Challenge, those 3 questions can be asked just by a single individual on a non-AI specific project, but they just happen to be using AI. So I'm doing a report for a client. I know I'm going to use AI to do some research, maybe to draft some paragraphs. I can ask those 3 questions and you're going to come up with like, maybe this thing is going to hallucinate. What I want to highlight though about the nesting thing, because that's really important, is that there's a way in which this whole thing constitutes a system. What I mean by that is that it's not just that you've got an ENC team over here doing their thing and an ENC team over there doing their thing. At each level of the ENC, they are asking, how do we support the lower level? So let's think for a second about a department team, a department ENC team. Let's say you're in the marketing department, maybe the compliance leader. Every ENC team has an ENC team leader, and this could be someone in compliance. Someone in compliance, by the way, should be on each of these ENC teams. That way they're not asked after all the stuff has been done, hey, can you check that this is cool? No, they're someone from compliance is in that conversation early on, making sure that of the nightmares that are identified, violating these various, let's say, regulations is on the list, and that appropriate steps are taken to mitigate the likelihood of realizing that nightmare. Okay. The goal of, let's say, the marketing ENC team or the HR ENC team is not, hey, let's create policy and rules for all of our people. Right. It's how do we help those lower level teams, those project level teams within the department? How do we help them answer their 3 questions? How do we help them avoid the nightmares? So what are the nightmares for our department, for the marketing department? What are the resources we should provide marketing personnel? Now, could the resource be a policy? Again, it's a tool. I'm not sure it's the most efficient or most effective tool. I think it's not. But there are other things that a department can do in order to foster nightmare avoidance among the teams. For instance, maybe what we need to do is make sure that there are quarterly meetings among project managers to talk about nightmares they almost ran into, strategies they use in order to avoid those nightmares, so on and so forth. So by sort of quarterbacking cross-team conversation, that's a thing that you can do, a resource the department can do to help the department avoid its respective ethical nightmares. And then you think about the enterprise ENC team, board level C-suite. What resources do our departments need in order to avoid their nightmares? And so again, maybe a policy's in the mix somewhere, but there's lots of other things. Like, let's make sure there's cross-departmental communication so that we can avoid those nightmares that emerge from, let's say, AIs
gaps.
from different departments. Yeah, from the gaps, exactly. The gaps between departments. And so ENC teams, especially at those upper levels, should see their mission not as, can I create the rules that everyone has to abide by, but rather, how do I enable those other teams to engage in nightmare avoidance? How do I increase the probability that they'll be successful in their nightmare avoidance? What are the resources I need to give them? What's the training that they need to use those resources effectively? And so there's a kind of cascading enablement all the way up from the C-suite down to the project level and even down to the individual. That said, important to highlight, very important to highlight, you don't have to start this with the C-suite. Maybe you've got one high-risk project going on. Create an ENC team for that project at that project level and nothing else. Maybe HR is doing a lot with AI and marketing is not. Okay, so create an HR ENC team, but not one for marketing. And notice they don't have to wait around for some enterprise-wide policy to be passed to know what to do, because what they're fundamentally engaged in is identifying the problems that are relevant, the nightmares that are relevant to them, and problem solving. And they should be able to do that without a policy, especially if they have a method and a framework and a worksheet and all that in order to do those kinds of things. Yes, you can start with the C-suite, but you don't have to. And that's crucial because we need something that is rapidly implementable and scalable on an as-needed basis. And there isn't a solution, as far as I know, other than the Ethical Nightmare Challenge. I mean, maybe, I don't know if this is good or bad news. Maybe there'll be copycats at some point. Sorry, copy tigers. But I mean, you did it, so I had to.
Hey, we're on a roll now,
We're on a roll. I even forgot. Now I forgot. What are you on a roll about? Oh, you can start.
Yeah, I mean, you can start at the top or you can start at the bottom. I mean, I would argue that, let me kind of throw something in here. This is a big threat and it's a big opportunity from my standpoint. If we're just going to if we're just going to apply the same sort of tactics to this new technology, we're going to fall flat. We're going to be, more importantly, I think, lose or let slip through our fingers the opportunity for us to add significant value and add significant, we can't apply a crystalline structure to this thing that's extremely dynamic. We need to have something that can flex and that can move with it, And I think one of the benefits of the system. No, please.
Okay. No, what are the benefits of the system?
Yeah. Okay. All right, we're both just so polite, you know what I mean? One of the benefits of this system is that, again, it's applicable across the board. It can work with a small team. It can work with an entire department. But as it kind of integrates together, it can provide really a lot of context for that executive level. Because, again, from an executive level or from a leadership level, they don't know all those use cases. They don't know. So like the simplicity of it, I think, is what's great. It's three simple questions. And of course, that can become more complex if you're using cross-functional and all those kinds of things. It's based on these three simple questions. It can be applied to a single project. It can be applied to a whole department. And as these individual ethical nightmare challenges that are happening on the sort of disintegrated level, as those integrate together, it provides really like a layer of context and sort of like risk weighting that can inform which gaps might exist from an executive or leadership perspective. And so what I'm talking about here is really a massive opportunity for us in ethics and compliance who are trying to, we obviously see that this this risk wave is sort of cresting across the shores of our organizations. We're like, we need to do something with it. There's a lot of talks and a lot of webinars out there that I think are a little bit kind of dated insofar as the things that they're espousing are things that you have, kind of answered with this book because you've kind of already applied those and you've seen how slow moving they are and you've seen how, rigid they are. They can't really move with the business or these new use cases.
Yeah, I think all that is right. And I want to highlight another opportunity for compliance professionals in particular. Often compliance people in legal are seen as blockers They are
Exactly.
seen as
Great
the
point.
Department of No. And I don't think no one likes being that, right? Here's what I think most compliance professionals want. They want to help. They don't want to just
Right.
be the no-sayers, the blockers. They want to help people get their stuff past the finish line so they can deploy, blah, blah, blah. I mean, after all, compliance people need to get paid, and they get paid when people sell their products, whether other people sell their products or services. The way that this is framed, it's, as I've said before, it's collaborative problem solving. It's not, here are the rules, make sure you follow the rules. And compliance professionals are in a great position to be able to say something like, I don't want to block. I want to help you problem solve. I get the business case for it. I get the business importance of it. I'm not here to say no. I'm here to help you say how, given, let's say, existing laws and regulations. And by including me on the ENC team, or by letting me lead the ENC team, I'm here as a problem solver with you, not as someone who says red light, green light.
Yeah, and it's fast. Like, this is a high velocity kind of approach.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like kinetic. It's like a kinetic approach to this, as opposed to, something that we're just kind of etching in stone and it's passing through committee and all those kinds of things. It can really move with the business. And that's what I was kind of talking around, before. We have such an opportunity, for those of us who are in ethics and compliance and who maybe stepped into a role that has had a bad reputation, maybe because of an old leader or because of misconceptions or stereotypes within the organization. What better way to add value, to your point, to the business, to connect your efforts to things that the business cares about? Every business has some kind of AI initiative going on right now. If you can be a tailwind on that to make sure that, like, yes, we're utilizing this in a smart way without gumming up the works. I mean, you totally elevate yourself from a power perspective, from an influence perspective, from a visibility inside the organization standpoint. It's really a massive opportunity. But again, we talk about this almost every week, that, the next chapter of ethics and compliance can be extremely different than the last chapter, but it's going to take us doing things different. And what I love about this challenge, this framework, this system, is that it really is a way to kind of make that a reality in the context of this thing that's top of mind for every leader and every board member in the country right now. Okay, so we got a couple of minutes left here. We got a couple of minutes left here. Man, I got so many more questions. Okay, all good. You got to get the book. You got to read the book. It's definitely worth your time. So let's, somebody is in the audience today. They're loving what they're hearing. They're feeling like, oh my gosh, finally the clouds are parting. This is some action I can actually take to add more value to the business, to kind of put those guardrails on so we don't go careening off the cliff into the Italian countryside. What's one thing this week that they should do after this webinar? What's one kind of action they can take to start moving toward a more sort of dynamic risk management approach to this conversation?
I mean, aside from reading the book?
Yes. Yeah. That's a given. Okay, this is going to be on everyone's. If you get Prime, it should be there tomorrow. Okay.
That's right. Prime is very impressive. What should they do? I mean, I think that the thing to do is to start thinking about how do we. I think the thing to do is to talk to people in your organization and just say, don't you think we need some way of doing this that's not policy driven, that's not policy first? How can we, do you think that we can figure out how to rapidly implement some kind of, I would say, nightmare avoidance, risk avoidance, say what you want. I think that if you can get just a handful of people on board, you can start figuring out how to create an ENC team or something like it. I mean, I've got, the sort of official way of doing it, but there's ways of sort of DIYing it if you like.
Yeah. Again, it's these three questions that kind of keep applying across the business.
Here's what you can do. You could ask different people in the organization, do you know what the ethical, reputational, legal nightmares are that we have to avoid for AI for our organization? And if the answer is no, well, then you've got strong reason to say, don't you think that's probably something we should identify? I mean, if we're going to try to implement AI and at scale, don't you think we should know what the worst case scenarios are?
Yeah. What does failure look like?
Yeah. What does disaster look like? Yeah. And if your company, if various people throughout your organization don't know what disaster looks like, that's crazy. That's just crazy. I'm a risk taker, but that's crazy.
You're also an optimist. And so maybe we can end on this. We talked about this sort of analogy of fighter jets and submarines. in that we have figured out ways to, kind of deal with the risks that go along with these tremendous technologies. Yeah. For those of us in the audience, like, what gives you the most hope that the ethics and compliance departments are the ones that can specifically kind of address these risks? That ethics and compliance are the right people to kind of guide their organizations through the application of these risk mitigating strategies. Yeah.
So they can't do it alone. That's, there's no role that can do it alone. Data scientists can't do it by themselves. I'm sorry. Compliance people can't do it by themselves. Innovation people can't do it by themselves, whatever. But I mean, obviously they know how to think about bad case scenarios. They know how to think about nightmares. So they're in a good position. They also have lots of knowledge about, let's say, regional differences. Here's nightmares over in that region versus this region, depending on where we're deploying our product or services. So they're ideally situated to be not only part of the conversation, but to lead the conversation.
Yeah, we're really in a unique. Yeah. It just kind of echoes what my belief is. Like, we have a very unique skill set in this industry. We have a unique perspective. We have a unique access throughout the organization. Some of those pathways are already kind of worn through the forest, you know what I'm saying, for our department, which is very different than a lot of other departments, you know what I'm saying? So, like, who better than us? Listen, nobody's coming for us. Nobody's coming to save us. We have to be those leaders, and we have to be the change that we want to see in the world. We need to be changed and we need to push for the change that we need to see within our organization. That's why we have these jobs. That's what we've been hired to do. So this is about kind of, bringing some boldness and some confidence to this thing that, has a lot of tailwinds behind it, and kind of asserting ourselves into these processes, not only for the betterment of our own career security perspective, but for the benefit of the organization.
Yeah, and I forgot about the first part of what you were talking about with the sort of, we're talking about complex engineered systems here. So, we've done other dangerous things, creating nuclear facilities, creating fighter jets, creating commercial airplanes. And we've done it mostly, not 100%, nothing is 100% safe, but we've done it mostly safely, precisely because we've got things like regulations and people in compliance who are making sure that the plane gets built correctly, gets tested correctly, gets maintained correctly, so on and so forth. So we need those people in order to be able to properly build and test and deploy and operate and maintain AI, which at the end of the day is a very complex engineered system. And so the idea that you're going to successfully deploy phenomenally complex engineered systems, which are high risk, without compliance people, that's bananas.
Well, let's get a massive round of applause for the one and only Reed Blackman. I was really excited for this conversation. And as always, you are a phenomenal guest. I am dropping a link to the chat. I'm dropping a link in the chat right now for the book. If you want to pick that up. We're also giving away 20, like I said, and we're going to be at a couple of conferences coming up at HCCA. I'm getting a whole stack of them to give out, and we're going to have a session. We got to talk about this afterwards. Stay tuned. There might be some more sessions coming up cool, if you're going to be at Compliance Week in a couple of weeks. So thank you so much, Reed. Phenomenal. Follow Reed.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Podcast. Follow his Substack. And definitely pick up the book. You will not be disappointed. We'll see you Thursday, where we're answering all your questions from our benchmark report. There were a bunch of questions in the chat and a bunch of questions that came in through DM that we were not able to get to during the session. So we're going to be diving deep on all of those, how we can improve our programs, drive more change, and drive more impact in our company. So see you Thursday. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.